Well, thank you so much. I'm so happy to almost be in Vilnius and very excited to share, well, yes, my story with you and the reason why I'm been invited to this wonderful stage. So I hope to use my time here to hopefully inspire you and to see the value of curiosity, to release the human potential in your organizations. I'm going to use some of my time to share my story with you, the reason for my passion and work, and why I have been invited here. I'm also going to talk about why all of us need to ignite our curiosity and be brave enough to engage in conversations, to connect with each other as colleagues and as humans in the workplace to create a sustainable future together. And I truly believe that this future belongs to the curious, the ones who are not afraid to question it, to try it, explore it, poke at it, turn it inside out and upside down. And millennials, the also called Generation Z, the new talents, they ask questions and they poke and they challenge and they change everything. They do not ask if they can work for you. They ask, why should they work for you? What do you as an organization stand for? What are your values and how do they match with their values? Millennials are resilient and value-driven. They strongly believe business must have purpose beyond profit, and they will not accept status quo. And as a result, they redefine the future of work and continue to push for societal change in order to create a more equitable and sustainable world. They want to be part of something bigger than themselves. They do not work for a logo. They work for a cause and they work for each other, for their team. According to PwC's recent global survey of 3,200 workers in more than 40 countries, strong cultures, as Ole also talked about, drive better business outcomes. Organizations with a view of culture as a distinction and a source of competitive advantage maintain a sense of community better, respond to customer needs better, innovate with a higher degree of success, and deliver better business results, right? So what is a company culture? You might be familiar with the expression that the culture is in these walls, right? Well, it's not. Where's the culture? It's in you, it's in the people. The culture in an organization is really not something we have, especially not in the walls of our offices. It's something we do. It's in everyone's behavior, communication, and interaction every day. And my personal journey into curiosity and communication and connections and company culture started 8 years ago, and it started, as a lot of things do, because of a man. And in all modesty, I have to tell you that I'm married to the most wonderful man sometimes. Well, I'm not married sometimes, but he is wonderful sometimes, right? However, the thing that really connected the two of us from the very beginning were the great conversations. We could just talk for hours and hours, and through our conversations, I came to understand that this had to be just about the wisest man on earth. And this is, of course, not the case now, many years later. However, he was just so interesting and interested because he asked questions and then he even listened and then he asked more questions, and frankly, so did I. And fast forward a few years and we have 2 more children in addition to my 2 boys from a previous marriage. And I began to realize that once these kids were gone to bed, we were spending much of our alone time together, exhausted on the sofa, in front of the TV, and also preferably with our phones in our hands, and not anonymously, if you recognize this, right? And I really missed our conversations. I still had a lot that I wanted to talk about. I had a lot that I wanted to ask him, and even more so, I had a lot of questions that I wish that he would ask me from time to time. However, it was not only our conversations I was missing. I was also really scared of losing us. I had gone through a divorce several years previously, and I was terrified of once again finding myself in a situation where we would first lose connection, communication, and then connection. Because I had learned the hard way that when we stop asking, we stop sharing, and then we stop caring. So I began to write down questions on small paper notes and collected them in an envelope. And that was questions about us as individuals, as a family, as a couple. And this envelope was quite full when I presented it to my husband one night. And over a bottle of wine, which of you, of course, need to get a Norwegian man to open up, we started to randomly pick questions. And that night was kind of magical for us, 9 years ago almost. It was like going back to those first years of dating. Remember those days when you're naturally or actually curious of each other? And we shared and we laughed and we even cried for hours, and we didn't pick that many questions because each question generated so much conversation. And I remember thinking that this must be fun, entertaining, and maybe even meaningful for all couples out there. And so back then began my journey to develop a tool to ignite curiosity, start conversations, and fuel connections. And in November 2013, I launched in Norway what is now known as Fuelbox, the box of great conversations for couples. However, since I had worked in the pharmaceutical industry for 11 years and the last 5 years with developing team leaders and people, I soon came to think that, well, it's not only in a couple's relationship we need to be curious of each other and talk with each other to be happy together and to make it together, that is to succeed together. So what began with a feeling of disconnection has become a tool for connection. Fuelbox has become a concept of a dozen different tailored fuel boxes in 9 different languages, and even a Fuelbox app, which you can find in thousands and thousands of homes and schools and private and public organizations and businesses, not only in Norway, but in several other countries. And me and my wonderful team of 9 colleagues, we work every day to help businesses implement Fuelbox as a tool to release the collective potential in their organization. And Fuelbox, whether we're talking about Fuelbox couples or team or Fuelbox leadership or Fuelbox family or even Fuelbox youth or the app, are all about cultivating curiosity, about coming together face to face, picking relevant questions to kickstart reflection and great conversation that develop and strengthen ourselves, our connections, and whole organization through sharing and learning and growth. So my personal needs were the reason for developing Fuelbox. However, it may not seem that I was alone in having these needs, because what curiosity, asking questions, and having these conversations comes down to is connection. I have learned that our connections is the most important thing all of us really have. They are crucial to how we feel, how content and happy we are, for our health, and for how we perform in our homes, in our schools, and especially also in the workplace. We all have the need to be seen, to be heard, to feel valued, and to have a sense of belonging. A lot of studies show this now, and I think all of us here also know this. And why has it become so important today and so relevant even in the workplace? I think that has everything to do with the world we live in. The fantastic technology that we are surrounded by today has made the concept of distance very different. The world has become smaller and more accessible in so many wonderful ways. However, the question remains, has this wonderful technology brought us closer to each other? Or has it perhaps brought us closer to everyone else, except those closest to us? Today, we work in front of these screens, we are entertained by them, and we spend hours being social through different devices. So these screens and these mobile devices that we are all more or less dependent on, they not only change what we do and how we do it, but they also change who we are, because we are getting used to being together without being together. We live in a world today where we hold these phones more than we hold each other, and we ask far more questions of Google than we ask of each other. The paradox is that we are more disconnected in a world that has never been more connected. We are connected, but we are alone. Look at my slide, even when we are together. And what does this mean for the workplace? With new hybrid solution and ambition to create agile leaders and agile teams, how do we attract and keep talents then? How do we build company cultures where talents not just want to come, but where they want to stay? There are many studies and surveys done lately that shows that the pandemic will and should change the way we work, and that it has changed all of ours, and especially the upcoming generation, the new talents, expectation to how they will work. Flexibility and autonomy being on the top of their list, together with purpose. This is not something we can ignore if we want to attract and keep talents. So how do we release the individual and the collective potential in our new hybrid organization? Because loneliness is still one of the world's greatest epidemics, and this COVID-19 pandemic has not changed this for the better for us. And loneliness, as you know, is really bad for us, for our health, for our performance, and especially in the workplace. And then loneliness is not about being alone. For example, in your home office, we can feel alone together with others. And that's probably the worst kind of loneliness, because loneliness is about disconnection. It's about not feeling seen and heard and valued, and that we belong. So that is why I believe that is an important, if not the most important, leadership responsibility to create space for conversations that would otherwise not take place. Conversations where we can get to know each other better in a way that creates connections, belonging, unity in a company. Conversation where we can share and explore our different perspectives and learn from each other. Conversation where we receive feedback and acknowledgement for what we do, but even more so for whom we are. And last but certainly not least, conversations where we can connect, engage, and explore our shared purpose and value. And I will just show you a small selection of how you could start the conversation in your team, in your company, with a few questions from Fuelbox team and our Fuelbox app. So this isn't a question to connect people, right? And questions to invite all of your colleagues to discuss important issues to create the business that you want. At a big business summit here in Norway a few weeks ago, two great sources of inspiration talked about what they think is crucial to succeed as organizations in the future. Irene Meyer, co-writer of No Rules Rule on the culture of Netflix, and Jitske Kramer, who is a social anthropologist, they said that we need less bullet point and spreadsheet meetings and more campfire conversation. Can you imagine campfire conversations in the office? But they stress that culture is about connections and bonds between people. And this means that we must set aside time for great conversation to establish these connections and ask the questions that are important to get the culture we want and need to succeed. Because there's always something more urgent than having a great conversation, both in our personal life and also in the workplace, right? And we talk all the time, don't we? But what are we actually talking about? Do we have the conversation that makes us feel seen, and understood and heard and valued, and that creates belonging? Do we ask the questions that are important to bring about the culture we want, as Meyer and Kramer said? And then how important are these conversations and these connections in the workplace really? To enjoy and be happy at work, obviously, but to perform and create results. What really characterizes the most efficient teams? The teams that performs the best in an organization over time, measured in financial outcome. That's really why we are here in this team, right? And that is also what Google wanted to find out. And maybe some of you know this, but they analyzed 180 teams and interviewed hundreds of employees over a period of 2 years in their study Aristoteles, because they wanted to know what characterizes the most efficient teams in our organization, the teams that performs the best over time, measured in financial outcome. And they had an idea. They had an idea that the teams that were put together by the most competent people that had complementary competencies had to be the dream team, right? And what they found was quite the opposite. Who is on a team matters less than how the team members interact with each other. They learned that there are 5 key dynamics that set successful teams apart from other teams, and by far, psychological safety was the most important one. In teams where the members feel safe to take risk, be vulnerable in front of each other, perform the best. And mind you, this performance was measured in financial outcome. So the question is, what is really psychological safety? Well, psychological safety is about giving candid feedback, being vulnerable, openly admitting mistakes, and learning from these mistakes together. So how can we create a culture and a team where people feel psychologically safe? Safe enough to be who they are, say what they mean, admit mistakes, or that they are uncertain on how to go about a task. A culture where all employees dare to challenge status quo and bring their ideas to the table. I believe that psychological safety starts with our connections with each other, with trust. So to create psychological safety, we need to create trusting relationships in our team. And then the question is, what is trust? There's many definitions on trust, and I with many like Charles Feldman. He says that trust is choosing what is important to you to become vulnerable to the actions or reactions of others. Engaging in a conversation and sharing something personal or sharing your thoughts on a specific topic with each other in a team is also trusting each other. Having a great conversation where we ask questions and share with each other is actually practicing trust. So creating space for conversations that would otherwise not appear is actually creating space for developing trust in a team or in an organization. And trust is fundamental in the new ways of working. What I have learned the last 8 years is that being curious, asking questions, and sharing our thoughts, perspectives, and stories with one another creates intimacy in a team, in a relationship, recognition, respect, understanding, trust, belonging, and yes, even love. And if there's something we need more of in our homes, in our workplaces, in our world, it is these words. And it is not something we can take for granted. It is something we have to take responsibility for. We as leaders need to create space for the conversations to happen, for the connections between colleagues to develop, and for the culture we want or need to be built. One of my personal role models is Sir Richard Branson. You all probably know him as the founder of Virgin Group, which controls more than 400 companies. He was awarded with the most admired boss back in 2015, I think. And one of his most famous quotes is, "Train people well enough so they can leave, but treat them well enough so they don't want to." I believe that great conversations really eat strategy for breakfast. And I have, of course, been inspired by the more famous quote, culture, eat strategy for breakfast, operational excellence for lunch, and everything else for dinner. This message has been linked to many different big leaders and authors in economy and leadership. Regardless of whom said it first, the message is that people are your most important asset. And your result depends first and foremost on your people and how they communicate and interact with each other. That is, on your company culture. You might have the greatest visions and plans and strategy documents, procedures, products and services, and intention to run your business in a sustainable way. But if you have not shaped the right culture, engaged all of your people, you will never reach the fullest potential of your company. And then there's change. Progress, growth, development is impossible without change. And those who cannot change their minds cannot change anything. And we live in a world where change is the new stability. And we as organizations, we need to embrace change as an opportunity to learn, to grow and achieve together. And for me, sustainability is closely linked to diversity and inclusion. And diversity and inclusion is really not about color, gender, religion, age, sexual identity. It's about perspective. It's about being open to the idea that other people have different life experiences because of the way they grew up, their religion, their age, their color, their gender, and whatever it is. And that it is of great value to bring these different perspectives to the table. Different perspectives are crucial to release the individual and the collective potential in an organization. Inclusion at work is a company culture that actively invite, involve, and value people and their different perspectives. Once again, leadership is very much about creating space for these conversations and invite people to these conversations and value their perspective. What I've also learned the last years is that it can for sure feel both very vulnerable and take a lot of courage and trust to look someone in the eyes and ask them these kinds of open-ended and deeper questions and start these conversations, because you never know what kind of reaction you will get, right? And that's why we need to practice. We need to practice curiosity, communication as individuals and as a team, as a culture. And of course, me and my husband, we practice with our kids. And once at our cabin, we picked this question from Fuelbox family together with our kids. Who could play the leading actors in the movie about our life? And you might think, what could possibly go wrong with this question? Well, I'll tell you. My husband, he was really happy about the outcome of that question because the kids thought that James Bond should play my husband, Thomas. And you can, of course, see the resemblance. Me, on the other hand, I was not that happy with the kids' choice because they thought my role should be played by no other than this thing, Sid from Ice Age. And mind you, when I was curious and explored their answer, they said it was not only because we look alike, it was also because we have the same personality. So you need to be brave enough to also embrace the answer that you will get. I will leave you in 30 seconds with a scientific proven tip, and which will not only make you great conversation partners with or without Fuelbox, but it will fuel all of your relationships and your connection. And this tip is only 3 words, and you can see Dr. Mark Holder's TED Talk for all the research and science behind this tip. But according to him and his science, there are 3 words all of us in this meeting should use more often. That will make us great conversation partners and fuel our connections. And these 3 words are, tell me more. These 3 words, they signal interest, that what you are saying to me means something to me. That means you mean something to me. And then something happened in the conversation and in the connection. So tell me more, and thank you so much for having me and listening to me. Thank you.
Berta, wow. What an inspirational presentation. Thank you very much there. I think that I had kind of, the first question was more of a philosophical one, right? Where's the direct link between the sustainability and fireside chats? But I think that you did open it up, right? That this is the backbone of the sustainability. If we are not curious, if we're not able to listen to people, I think that, you know, any thoughts about being sustainable will vanish in a second. Am I correct with that kind of outcome and output of the discussion?
I at least totally agree with you. And I also think that we need to understand we cannot only have a sustainable director in our company. We need to engage everyone, both to understand the possibilities in sustainability and their responsibility, but also to create engagement so that everyone is working together to create a sustainable business. So that is really my message.
But Berta, and I fully agree with you. And here comes the tricky question that I promised you with, right? In your presentation, you said yourself that it is hard for ourselves sometimes to talk to our loved ones, right? But imagine the CEO, right? We will have Paulus, for example, from Payco talking later on with us, and he manages hundreds, sometimes it's even thousands, right? So when it's hard to talk to our loved ones, what would the CEO, the shareholder, have to do to put the fire on and start this conversation that these would actually become the part of our culture?
Well, thank you for asking me that. Well, I really think we always, when we want to start something new or change something or improve something, we need to start with the leaders, right? So when we work with company, we always start with the top management, and we start having these conversations in the management team, the top management team. And then the leaders bring these conversations down to their leaders, and they have the conversation, and then they bring it further down to their team and engage all team members in these conversations. So, but it has to start on the top. And I also think it's a great idea for all leaders to show vulnerability. Of course, a leader for 1,000 people can't go around having these conversations, but they can post a video and share something personal, some personal reflection, something personal about themselves, to show some kind of vulnerability, show who they really are, to try and connect with their organization and to inspire others to do that further down. So I start with them. It always starts on the top, but I think it's a demand that comes from the bottom, really.
Perfect. Berta, once again, thank you very much. To the audience, I will kindly remind that Berta will be there with us in the summary discussions there. So should you have some philosophical or practical questions for Berta, please go ahead, shoot them in the comments there, and I will be more than happy to address them in the summary notes.